Hey guys, we just made some stain samples and wanted to go through them for you so you can kind of see the progression to get the finish that you're looking for. So the first one, this got run through a planer. This is kind of stock material, how it comes to us. The next one was run through a belt sander with 80 grit. The next one, belt sander with 120 grit. The next one was a hand orbital sander with 80. And then same thing with 120 and same thing with 150, okay? So I'm gonna go through this progression and kind of show you what to expect. So when it comes straight out of the mill, you're gonna get a lot of defects. You've got some chips and chunks in the wood happening here. You got a chip in the planer blade, and so you have lots of imperfections that need to get sanded out. Now you can go straight to a an orbital sander here with an 80 and then a 120 to get some of this out, but certainly is not the product you want to put finish on top of. Okay, now we went from this to this, so then we ran it through the wide belt sander with 80 grit. What's hard to see is all these little kind of speckles that are in here, these little lines. If you're not real familiar with wood, you don't even really notice it, but once you start to pay attention, you know, oh, that's coming from the belt sander. You can actually see this line right here as you follow this line across, and another line right here. Those are kind of waves that come as it goes through the belt sander, and the belt's not perfectly straight. So there's a lot of imperfections as it comes through the belt sander. Okay, and we went through the belt sander again with 120, looking much better. It has the platen head on it, so it sands it smoother, but you still have a lot of this speckling kind of graining that comes with the belt sander, and you're missing out. Really what you're missing is the depth of the grain and the beauty of the wood. Okay, so we can look at these two, and you have the color, but you're missing the beauty of the wood, and we'll come back to that. So here, let's just look at these two and compare these two. So this is 80 grit with an orbital sander, and this is wide belt sander. Okay, see how much more of the grain you're getting in the wood by going from a belt sander to a random orbital sander. But what happens here, let's get close. See all these little swirl marks? See all these swirls in here? That's from the orbital sander, okay? And that's because this is a coarse orbital sander. You can really see all those swirls inside there, okay? So that's because we need to step up the grain. So we're going to go from here to 120. Now if you look at 120, the clarity in the grain is a little different, and the truth is typically you would see a darker color with a coarser grain, but that's not what happened when we stepped up to 150, so I'm not sure about that. But you can, as we pull in here, you can still see they're more faint, but there's still a lot of these orbital swirl marks. Okay, so what we're trying to do is get that out to get to a finer finish. Okay, so let's look at the last one here. And so this was the orbital sander with 150 grit, and you can just see as you look at this, you look at the depth of the grain and the coloration that you're getting in the wood compared to the rest of these. I mean, just from a distance you're seeing hardly any grain until we get all the way up here to this one, and now you're like, wow, you're really seeing the grain. So as we zoom in on this, you can see that the grain is really pretty, really pronounced, and you really don't see swirl marks because we've upped that the sandpaper to the 150 grit. And actually now I'm kind of remembering what happened. This was a really worn out piece of sandpaper, and so I think this actually kind of I don't know the right word for it, but it kind of closed off the grain, burned in the grain, because the sandpaper was really old. I just grabbed an old piece of sandpaper that was on here, and this was a brand new sheet of 150 grit. So that's why I think the pores are a little bit more open. You're getting this darker color, but you're also getting rid of some of those swirl marks. So it's really important to remember these steps when we're talking about carpentry. The essence of carpentry is getting the beauty out of the wood and portraying that. And when you've got this stuff over here, you're just deadening and really detracting from the beauty that is wood, that is carpentry. And so if you don't go through these steps to get all the way over to here, imagine that same piece of wood, just you're hiding it behind the imperfections because you're not taking the times. I mean, if we look over here at this, you know, very similar in color, but this is so rich, you're getting all the grain out of it. So that's why we sand. And the issue is, on a raw piece of wood, this and this would look almost the same. So if you didn't know what you were looking for, you would look at that piece of wood and say, oh, well, it's all prepped the same, it's ready to go. But it's not, because it hasn't gone through those steps. And what we want is to give someone the most beautiful product possible, and that requires a little discipline, a little learning and training to know how to prep the wood so that this is what you get. With an untrained eye and the not proper discipline, you could sell this all day long and be like, oh, this is just what wood looks like. And maybe some people would believe you, but that's not what we want. We want the most beautiful product possible. So it requires going through those steps. So we're going to post these up on the wall so everybody can see them. But it's a great visual aid for why we go through the sanding steps that we go through.